There's not an easy way to tell somebody that they have a disease that there's not a cure for. I'm Jim Huff. I have attended Trinity Community Church, originally Trinity Baptist Church, since the fall of 1978, with the exception of about 4 years in which we lived in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. I first started attending Trinity when I met a young lady who invited me to go to church with her. And during the fall of 1978, I started attending with her. And one of the nice things from that period of time was I attended what was then the college and career class. As far as my roles at Trinity, I have through the years been involved in the ministry in any number of ways. I taught a junior high Sunday school class for a number of years. I also led a young married class for a period of time. Served in Awanas for close to 20 years as game leader, Pal and Pioneer director, club commander, so I've done those. And then most recently working with the Sparks again. Served as a deacon for a number of years, and probably the most recent thing I did was teach the men's adult Sunday school class for a while. I met Pat in 1978, and we were both taking classes at the community college, but as I said, my college career was not completely straight. She had graduated from Virginia Tech with a degree in animal science and had not been able to find a position in anything that would hire her in an animal science profession. So she was taking some classes to improve her business skills, and I was working on finishing up the associate's degree in business administration, so we had an economics class together. And we may have seen each other around campus during the first month of the year. And one day she was sitting at lunch, and she and I have always joked about this as to whether she invited me there or if I asked to sit down. But anyway, it ended up we had lunch together. That shortly thereafter ended up in our first date. She received roses after the first date, which sort of freaked her out and raised questions from her and from her parents. But you know, that was the way things worked. And we dated on through the autumn months of 1978. And shortly before Christmas, I asked her to marry me. She did not answer it immediately. She kept me on edge for between a week and 2 weeks. And in retrospect, I really respect her for that because she wanted to be absolutely certain because of the lifetime commitment involved in it. So we became engaged in January, and we married at Trinity the following June by Pastor Monroe. And first year after we were married, we lived here in Christiansburg. And then the company I worked for offered for me to move to Winston-Salem, North Carolina, which we did. And we lived there for 4 years. And our daughter, Amanda, was born while we lived in Winston-Salem. But Pat and I both grew up very close to our grandparents. And we felt that something was missing if our kids could not grow up around their grandparents. So I arranged a transfer back to Virginia. And we lived with my in-laws, LJ and Rosetta, for about 3 months while our house in Winston-Salem sold, until we bought the house where I currently live at today. And after that, we were blessed with 2 more children, Ben and John. And during the years until Jonathan started to school, Pat was a stay-at-home mom. And then once Jonathan started the kindergarten, she went to work. And a couple of different production planning jobs, which was similar to what she had done in Winston-Salem, and then eventually a position handling import scheduling productions for Tetra, which is a fish food company. In 2012, Pat was diagnosed with early onset Alzheimer's. She was only 54, 55 at the time. And until the doctor gave us the diagnosis, we really did not have a clue as to what was her problem. And what led us to that, the year and a half to 2 years previous to the diagnosis, to this time with the doctor, um, she had had problems at work. They had changed their inventory management system, and she never could grasp it. And she spent a year that she would work anywhere from 50 to 65 hours a week trying to do the job that she'd been doing for 15 years, and was struggling more and more with it, and started making mistakes at work, and eventually was terminated in February of 2012 for job performance from a job she's been doing 15 years, and that was difficult for her. Emotionally very difficult to say, I'm trying to do my job. I don't understand why this is not working. We took it as, well, just having trouble learning the computer. So we went through the spring and summer of that year, and she started a new job in September of 2012. And within 3 weeks of starting the new job, it was obvious she could not learn it. She was terminated from that job. She got lost driving 3 times during the 3 weeks of trying to drive to that job, and I would have to go find her to get her home, and eventually said, wait a minute, we've got to find out what's going on. So that led us to her normal family doctor. He did the full workup of anything, no underlying problems found, sent us through the MRIs and everything at Carilion. Again, no underlying problems. So for Alzheimer's disease, there's not a definitive test to tell you that you have Alzheimer's disease, but it's done by the process of elimination. And the day that he brought us back into the office to tell us the news, first of all, he was very direct to start with, because there's not an easy way to tell somebody that they have a disease that there's not a cure for. Once he had told us the news, he was incredibly empathetic and sympathetic to us. He was great. And that day he probably gave us the best advice that we've had any time during the entire period of Pat's illness. And he said, live your life as normally as you can for as long as you can. So that led us to the diagnosis. At that time, she was still able to function at home, and I would work. For the next couple of years, we were able to function with her at home and me working and taking over all the responsibilities. And then probably by 2014, it became obvious she wasn't safe to leave by herself. So her mother, Rosetta White, stepped in, and when I was working, Pat would stay with Rosetta, and that worked for about 2.5 years. And as we got into 2016, it became obvious that Pat's condition was worsening, and she was probably by then approaching phase 6 of Alzheimer's, stage 6. And I had made plans to retire as of October 1st of 2016. The Lord took it out of my hands. A week before I was going to retire, Pat had a heart attack and fell. And in her fall, she fractured her neck. And so between all of that required her to go to rehab. And by the time she had been in rehab for a month, the people at the rehab said there's no way that she's going to be well enough you can ever take care of her at home. So that's what led us to her being in Commonwealth. And she's been there for 4.5 years now. The first 2 years that she was at Commonwealth, she was able to carry on limited conversations, and initially she was still able to walk because she had learned to walk again after the fall and the fracture in the vertebrae, and she had some of the Alzheimer's issues of wandering while she was there. But after about the first 1.5 years, she lost her ability to walk, and since then she has been either wheelchair or bedbound. And just before the COVID situation started a year ago, she had reached the point where she was only speaking in single words and responding to questions. Today, we're able to be in to see her twice a week. In fact, I saw her this morning. Most of the time, she is sleeping. She will occasionally open her eyes, does not seem to respond to touch or verbal. Staff tells me that she still eats, but they also tell me it's reflexive eating, which is typical of somebody in that stage, that if they feel something in front of their mouth, they'll open their mouth and let the staff put it in. She hasn't been able to feed herself since actually the heart attack in the fall. The first 2.5 years she was at Commonwealth, I fed her breakfast every morning, but maybe a half dozen for 2.5 years. For Pat, I just really request prayer to keep her from pain and anxiety, and to pray for the Lord's will, because it's His timing. As far as for me, pray for me for perseverance, for strength. One of the most difficult things from a husband's perspective, after having shared life together for 4 decades, is the lack of emotional intimacies with anybody, because you really don't have that person that you share your life with. And that becomes very difficult of, okay, who do I share things with when I'm hurting or when I have needs? And the kids try to, but it's not the same thing. And I think that's probably the more difficult thing.